My parents demanded my $3 million penthouse for my sister in court. The judge read my evidence and they froze. I sat in the defendant's chair watching my mother dab fake tears while my father's attorney argued why I should hand over the home I'd worked 6 years to afford. Across the courtroom, my sister Vanessa scrolled through her phone, already mentally redecorating my place. When Judge Reeves asked if I had anything to say, I stood and placed a tablet on the evidence table. The first video started playing, security footage from my building showing Vanessa trying to jimmy my front door lock at 2 a.m. 3 weeks earlier. My mother's dabbing hand froze mid-air. My father's face went white. The courtroom went absolutely silent, except for Vanessa's voice on the recording saying, "This should have been mine anyway." I'm Claire Bennett, and for 28 years, I watched my parents worship my younger sister while treating me like an inconvenient employee. Every achievement I earned was met with, "That's nice, dear," while Vanessa's participation trophies got framed and mounted. When I bought my penthouse last year with money I'd saved from my software engineering career, my parents demanded I give it to Vanessa because she deserved a nice place. I refused. They sued me. Big mistake. My childhood in our Bellevue split level was a masterclass in unequal treatment. Vanessa got the larger bedroom with the bay window. I got the converted storage room next to the water heater. When I made honor roll every semester, my parents took me to Denny's. When Vanessa passed her driver's test on the 3rd try, they threw a backyard party for 40 people. My college fund went toward Vanessa's community college tuition after she flunked out of the university they'd enrolled her in. I paid for my computer science degree at University of Washington with scholarships, part-time jobs, and student loans I finished repaying last year. The favoritism wasn't subtle. During high school, I worked 20 hours a week at a grocery store while maintaining a 3.9 GPA. Vanessa got an allowance of $200 monthly for being part of the family. I had to buy my own laptop for programming classes. Vanessa got a new MacBook for her 18th birthday, despite never using it for anything beyond Instagram. When I graduated summa cum laude, my parents attended but left early to help Vanessa move into her 3rd apartment in 2 years. When Vanessa dropped out of community college the 2nd time, they held a "You Tried" dinner party in her honor. My software career started at a small startup in 2019, making $68 annually. I lived in a studio apartment in Northgate, drove a 2007 Honda, and saved 30% of every paycheck. Vanessa lived at home rent-free, crashed my mother's Lexus twice, and worked a series of retail jobs she'd quit whenever a manager asked her to work weekends. By 2021, I'd moved to Technova Solutions as a mid-level developer making $155,000. I upgraded to a 1-bedroom in Fremont and kept saving. Vanessa was on her 5th job in 3 years and had started asking me for loans she never repaid. In March 2022, I purchased my penthouse. 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, 200 square feet on the 18th floor of a Capitol Hill luxury building with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Elliott Bay. I'd saved $640,000 for the down payment through 5 years of 70-hour work weeks, strategic job changes, and living below my means. The mortgage was $200 monthly, easily manageable on my senior architect salary of $320,000 plus equity. I had it custom furnished, installed a home office with 3 monitors, and finally had a space that felt like mine. I made the mistake of inviting my parents to see it that April. My mother walked through taking photos, already texting Vanessa about the master bathroom's rainfall shower. My father examined the smart home system and asked how much I'd paid. When I told them, he said, "Must be nice to spend our money so frivolously." I reminded him I'd bought it entirely with my own earnings. He scoffed and said something about how their genetics gave me the intelligence to earn that salary, so technically they'd contributed. 2 weeks later, they showed up at my building with Vanessa. The concierge called up asking if I was expecting guests. I wasn't. I told him to send them away. My mother called my phone 17 times in an hour, leaving increasingly hysterical voicemails about how I was being selfish and Vanessa needed a nice place because she was going through a hard time. The hard time was apparently being asked to pay rent after living with our parents for 25 years. I blocked their numbers temporarily. The lawsuit arrived via process server in May. Richard and Patricia Bennett versus Claire Bennett, demanding transfer of property at address redacted, based on claims they'd provided the down payment, and the property rightfully belonged to Vanessa, who needed it more. I sat in my living room reading the complaint, genuinely impressed by the audacity. They were claiming they'd given me $640,000, despite having maybe $180,000 in total retirement savings. They were arguing Vanessa's needs superseded my ownership. They'd attached emails I'd supposedly sent promising to buy Vanessa a home. Emails I'd never written. I called Lauren Vasquez, an attorney whose firm handled real estate litigation. She read the complaint during our meeting and started laughing. "This is the most baseless property grab I've seen in 15 years, she said. "They're claiming they gave you over $500,000 but have zero bank records, canceled checks, or wire transfers." I confirmed they'd never given me $1 toward the penthouse. Lauren leaned back in her chair. "Do you want to just settle this quickly, or do you want to destroy them in court?" I thought about 28 years of being treated as lesser than. Destroy them. Lauren filed a motion to dismiss based on lack of evidence, but my parents' attorney Gerald Hemmings argued they had verbal agreements and familial understanding. Judge Reeves allowed it to proceed to a hearing, probably figuring it would resolve itself once evidence was presented. That gave us 6 weeks to prepare. I gave Lauren complete access to my financial records, email accounts, text message history, and security camera footage from my building. She smiled when she saw what I'd documented. "You're an engineer. You've been keeping records." I nodded. "Habit from debugging code. Log everything." The discovery phase was enlightening. My parents submitted zero financial records showing they'd given me money because obviously those didn't exist. Instead, they submitted affidavits from relatives claiming they'd heard Richard and Patricia were helping me buy property. Lauren deposed 3 of these relatives. All admitted they'd never actually seen money change hands, just assumed based on what my parents told them. One aunt, my father's sister, broke during questioning and admitted she'd been asked to sign the affidavit without reading it carefully. We subpoenaed my parents' bank records. Their account showed no large withdrawals in 2022. The largest transactions were $8,000 to a cruise line and $12,000 to replace their roof. Their retirement accounts had remained untouched. When confronted with this during depositions, my father claimed he'd given me cash he'd been saving in a safe. Lauren asked for records of where he'd accumulated $640, $0,000 in cash. He couldn't provide any. She asked if he'd reported this cash to the IRS. He suddenly couldn't remember details. The forged emails were easier to debunk. The metadata showed they'd been created using an email generator website, sent from a temporary account to my parents' address, never passing through my actual email server. The IP address traced to my parents' home internet connection. When Lauren presented this to Hemmings, he went quiet for a full minute before saying his clients might have been mistaken about the source of those emails. But the best evidence came from my building's security system. I'd installed cameras throughout my penthouse after moving in, partially for security and partially because I enjoyed the smart home integration. Those cameras ran continuously, backed up to cloud storage. Lauren requested footage from the entire time I'd owned the place. What we found was remarkable. April 28th, 2:17 a.m., Vanessa attempting to unlock my door using what appeared to be a bump key, failing, and telling someone off camera, "I'll just wait until she gives me the code." May 3rd, 11:45 p.m., Vanessa and my mother in the building lobby. My mother arguing with the night concierge that she had a right to access her daughter's home, showing him what she claimed was a spare key, which the concierge correctly identified as fitting a different lock entirely. May 12th, 3:30 a.m., Vanessa again, this time with a male companion, trying to force my door with a screwdriver. The audio caught her saying, "Once we get inside, we can say we were just checking on things," before the companion pointed at the visible security camera and they fled. There were 17 separate incidents of attempted unauthorized entry over 6 weeks. My building's main entrance footage showed my mother trying to tailgate residents 6 different times. Hallway cameras caught Vanessa measuring my door frame and discussing with someone on the phone about changing the locks once we get possession. The concierge logs showed 43 calls from my parents demanding access, including one where my father threatened to sue the building if they didn't let him into his daughter's property that he'd paid for. Lauren compiled everything into a presentation that would make any jury weep. Bank records proving I'd saved every dollar myself. My employment history showing steady income growth. Tax returns documenting where my money came from. Security footage showing systematic attempts to illegally access my home. Text messages I'd saved where Vanessa sent me pictures of furniture she was planning to put in her new place. Screenshots of her Instagram posts showing my building's exterior with captions like, "Soon," and "upgrading my life." We also had my parents' financial records showing they'd recently paid $18,000 to Hemmings as a retainer, money withdrawn from their retirement account. They were spending their limited savings on this lawsuit while claiming they'd given me exponentially more. The math didn't math, as Vanessa would say in the text where she discussed selling my penthouse furniture and pocketing the money. The hearing was scheduled for June 14th at King County Superior Court. I took the day off work, put on my most professional suit, and arrived 30 minutes early. My parents showed up in formal wear, looking like they were attending a funeral for their dignity. Vanessa wore ripped jeans and a crop top, apparently unaware this was actual court. She spent the waiting period taking selfies in the courthouse hallway. Judge Diana Reeves was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s with a reputation for shredding frivolous lawsuits. She reviewed the initial filings and looked over her glasses at Hemmings. "Counselor, this appears to be a property dispute where the plaintiffs claim financial contribution, but have submitted no financial records. Would you like to explain before we begin?" Hemmings stood and launched into a speech about parental sacrifice and familial duty. He argued my parents had spent decades raising me, providing food and shelter, and that investment entitled them to benefit from my success. He painted Vanessa as a struggling young woman who needed stability while I was a wealthy tech worker who could easily buy another place. He suggested the court should consider not just legal ownership, but moral obligation. Judge Reeves let him finish, then turned to Lauren. Response? Lauren stood and smiled. "Your Honor, the plaintiff's argument essentially boils down to, we raised our daughter, therefore we own her assets. By that logic, every parent would have claimed to their adult children's property. What we have here is a simple case. Ms. Bennett purchased a home with her own money. The plaintiffs want that home for their other daughter. They fabricated claims of financial contribution. The evidence is conclusive. Let's see this evidence," Judge Reeves said. The tablet went on the court's display screen. Lauren started with my financial records. "Your Honor, these bank statements show Ms. Bennett's account balance growing from $15,700 in 2019 to $640,700 in 2022 through regular deposits matching her employment income. No deposits from external parties, no large gifts." She clicked forward. Tax returns showing all income properly reported and sourced from employment. Pay stubs from Technova Solutions documenting her salary. The wire transfer for the down payment coming entirely from her personal account to the title company. My mother whispered urgently to Hemmings. He requested permission to approach. Judge Reeves allowed it. They had a hushed conversation where I heard Hemmings say, "You told me you gave her cash." And my mother respond, "We meant to. It's basically the same thing." Lauren continued. The plaintiff submitted these emails allegedly from Ms. Bennett promising to purchase property for her sister. She showed the metadata. These were created on emailfake.com, a temporary email generation website, from the plaintiff's IP address. They are forgeries. Vanessa stopped looking at her phone. My father's face was turning red. But the most relevant evidence concerns the plaintiff's behavior after Ms. Bennett refused to simply hand over her property. Lauren started the security footage compilation. The courtroom watched Vanessa trying to break into my penthouse. Judge Reeves leaned forward. The footage of my mother arguing with the concierge played. The judge's expression hardened. The clip of Vanessa with a screwdriver ended with Judge Reeves asking, "Is that attempted burglary I'm watching?" "Yes, Your Honor," Lauren confirmed. 17 separate attempts to gain unauthorized access to Ms. Bennett's home. The building security team filed police reports for 3 incidents. Those reports are in your evidence packet. Hemmings was frantically flipping through his notes. He clearly hadn't known about the security footage. My parents had apparently omitted that detail when hiring him. Lauren pulled up the text messages. Judge Reeves read Vanessa's messages about selling my furniture, about the penthouse being wasted on me, about how she deserved it more. One message read, "Mom says once the judge makes Claire give it to me, we can rent it out and I'll have income without working." Judge Reeves's jaw tightened. The Instagram posts show plaintiff Vanessa Bennett treating this as a predetermined outcome, Lauren said, displaying screenshots. Here she's posted a photo of the building captioned, "Mine Soon." Here she's created a Pinterest board titled, "My New Penthouse" with renovation ideas. Here she's told her followers she's moving to Capitol Hill next month because family court is finally fixing things. Judge Reeves turned to Hemmings. "Counselor, did your clients inform you they'd been attempting to break into this property?" Hemmings stood slowly. "Your Honor, I was not made aware of any such activities. My clients indicated this was a simple family property dispute over financial contributions. Financial contributions you can't prove happened? My clients maintain they provided substantial support over the years, and that's not what the lawsuit claims," Judge Reeves interrupted. "The complaint specifically states they gave $640,000 for the down payment. I'm seeing zero evidence of that. What I am seeing is attempted burglary, forged emails, and what appears to be a systematic campaign to steal property from one daughter to give to another. My mother stood up crying. She's our daughter. We raised her. She owes us. Ma'am, sit down, Judge Reeves ordered. You're not helping your case. Vanessa decided this was her moment. This is so unfair. Claire has all this money and I have nothing. She should share with family. Judge Reeves looked at her with the expression of someone watching a car crash. Young lady, your sister's assets are not community property for you to claim. But I need it more. Need doesn't create legal ownership. Judge Reeves shuffled papers. Ms. Vasquez, is there anything else? Lauren stood again. Your Honor, I'd like to submit evidence of damages caused by this frivolous lawsuit. Ms. Bennett has incurred $47 in legal fees defending against baseless claims. She's been harassed by her family for months. Her security costs have increased. She's suffered reputational damage in her workplace as this has become office gossip. We're requesting dismissal with prejudice and full recovery of legal costs. Hemmings tried to argue. Your Honor, this is a family matter that perhaps could be resolved through mediation. There's nothing to mediate. Judge Reeves stated flatly. The property belongs to Claire Bennett. She purchased it with her own money. Her parents have no claim. Their other daughter definitely has no claim. I'm honestly shocked this made it to my courtroom. She looked at my parents. Did you genuinely believe you could present zero evidence and the court would just transfer your daughter's property because you wanted it? My father found his voice. We're her parents. We've sacrificed everything for her. She wouldn't even exist without us. Mr. Bennett, biological parenthood doesn't entitle you to your adult child's assets. If it did, every parent in America would be filing property claims against their successful children. She reviewed her notes. This lawsuit is dismissed with prejudice. The plaintiffs are ordered to pay defendants' legal fees totaling $47 within 90 days. If any member of the plaintiff family attempts to contact Ms. Bennett or access her property without explicit permission, she's authorized to seek a restraining order which this court will grant immediately. Hemmings tried once more. Your Honor, if I could request, this hearing is concluded, Counselor. I suggest you have a serious conversation with your clients about what constitutes legitimate legal action versus attempted theft via lawsuit. The gavel came down. My parents sat frozen. Vanessa was openly crying, mascara running down her face. She turned to me across the courtroom and screamed, I hate you. You've always been selfish. Mom and Dad gave you everything and you can't even share. Security moved toward her as her volume increased. That penthouse should be mine. You don't deserve it. Judge Reeves raised her gavel again. Young lady, you're approaching contempt of court. Sit down and be silent or you'll be removed. Vanessa kept yelling until the security officer physically escorted her into the hallway. Her voice echoed back through the closing doors. This isn't over. I'll find a way to get what I deserve. My father stood, defeated. You've destroyed this family, Claire. I hope you're happy living alone in that expensive tomb while your sister suffers. I spoke for the first time since the hearing began. I'm extremely happy, actually. I've spent 28 years watching you favor Vanessa while treating me like an ATM. This lawsuit was the best thing you could have done because now there's legal documentation of exactly what kind of parents you are. My mother sobbed. We loved you. We gave you everything. You gave me the storage room and hand-me-downs while Vanessa got the master bedroom and new clothes, I said, calmly. You paid for her college and car while I worked my way through school. You threw her parties for mediocre achievements while barely acknowledging my actual accomplishments. And now you're upset? The daughter you invested nothing in won't subsidize the daughter you spoiled rotten. Lauren touched my arm gently. Claire, we're done here. We left through the side exit. My parents and Hemmings were in heated discussion in the hallway, probably about how he'd failed to vet their claims properly. Vanessa was on her phone already posting about corrupt judges and unfair systems. I blocked her on all social media before we reached the parking garage. Back at Lauren's office, we debriefed. They'll likely appeal, she warned, but it will fail. Judge Reeves' ruling was airtight, and the evidence is overwhelming. The bigger question is whether they'll try anything else. Like what? Harassment, showing up at your work, continuing the break-in attempts. People who feel entitled rarely accept defeat gracefully. She handed me a card. This is a firm that specializes in restraining orders and harassment documentation. Given your sister's parting threat and your family's history of attempted unauthorized access, I'd suggest you have them on speed dial. I contacted building security when I got home, showed them the court order. They updated their files permanently flagging Richard Bennett, Patricia Bennett, and Vanessa Bennett as unauthorized persons barred from entry. Any citing would result in immediate police contact. The head of security thanked me for finally providing legal documentation of what they'd suspected was harassment. My parents made one more attempt to reach out before the appeal deadline. My father sent an email claiming they'd been misled by bad legal advice, and if I dropped the fee award, they'd accept the ruling. I forwarded it to Lauren. She replied directly informing him that settlement offers after judgment required formal legal process, and informal emails wouldn't be considered. Also, they had 72 days remaining to pay the $47,000 or face wage garnishment and asset liens. Vanessa tried a different approach. She created a GoFundMe titled "Family Court Stole My Home," with a long story about her evil sister who'd promised her a place to live, then sued to keep it. She posted my full name and photos of my building. The campaign raised $340 before GoFundMe shut it down for violating terms of service against harassment. Vanessa posted angry rants about censorship and family betrayal. Her followers numbered about 200, mostly other entitled people who thought the world owed them things. The $47.00 payment arrived on day 87 via cashier's check. Lauren confirmed receipt and filed the satisfaction of judgment. My parents had drained most of their retirement savings and taken a second mortgage on their Bellevue house to cover it. This information came from my aunt, the one who'd broken during deposition. She called to apologize for signing the affidavit and to tell me my parents were in financial crisis but too proud to admit defeat. She thought I should know in case they tried anything desperate. They didn't try anything desperate. They went silent. No calls, no emails, no showing up at my building. The security logs showed 0 attempts at access. I heard through my aunt that Vanessa had finally gotten a full-time job at a call center, forced by necessity since my parents could no longer subsidize her lifestyle. She'd moved into a studio apartment in Renton, 40 minutes from their house, paying $100 monthly with roommates. My parents had stopped throwing money at her failures because they no longer had money to throw. 3 months after the trial, I received an unexpected email from Hemmings. He'd been contacted by the Washington State Bar Association regarding a complaint filed by my parents claiming incompetent representation. He was responding to their complaint by submitting the full case file showing they'd misrepresented facts, failed to disclose attempted burglaries, and insisted on proceeding despite his warnings. The case was unwinnable. He attached the correspondence for my records and apologized for my parents' behavior. The Bar Association ultimately dismissed their complaint and sanctioned them for filing it frivolously. I settled into my penthouse completely free of family drama. I got a promotion to principal architect with a salary bump to $385,000. I started dating someone I met through work who knew nothing about the lawsuit until our 4th date when I finally explained my family situation. He was appropriately horrified and supportive. My building became my sanctuary. Exactly what I'd intended when I bought it. One evening in September, I was on my balcony watching the sunset over Elliott Bay when my phone rang from an unknown number. I answered cautiously. It was my aunt. She was calling to tell me my mother had shown up at her house crying, asking if she thought I'd help them avoid foreclosure on their mortgage. The second mortgage payment was destroying them financially. My aunt had said no, I wouldn't and shouldn't help. She was calling to warn me they might try to contact me directly with a sympathy play. They did try, 2 days later. An email from my mother's account with "I'm sorry" in the subject line. The body was a long explanation of how they'd only wanted what was best for Vanessa, how they'd made mistakes in favoring her, how they understood now that had been wrong. The final paragraph asked if I'd consider a loan to help them avoid losing their house, which they'd only mortgaged because of the legal fees from trying to help Vanessa. So really, it was my fault they were in this position. I showed it to Lauren. She laughed. The apology that ends with blaming you and requesting money. Classic. I didn't respond to the email. I blocked that address too. My life continued improving while theirs apparently deteriorated. I heard through my aunt that my father had to come out of retirement to work part-time at Home Depot to make mortgage payments. My mother had increased her bookkeeping hours. Vanessa was still in the Renton studio working at the call center, posting occasional bitter social media rants about unfair family dynamics and courts that favor rich people over struggling ones. None of them attended my aunt's Christmas party, the first family gathering they'd missed in 30 years. I went to that party. Saw relatives I'd avoided for years because they'd always taken my parents' side in everything. Many apologized once they'd learned the full story. My uncle, my mother's brother, pulled me aside and said he'd always thought the favoritism was obvious but hadn't felt it was his place to intervene. He congratulated me on the penthouse and the career success. Said his own daughter was studying computer science now, and had I mentioned my niece was inspired by my success. That conversation felt like vindication, not the court victory, but the moment when extended family finally acknowledged what I'd lived through. The golden child versus scapegoat dynamic had been visible to everyone. They'd just chosen not to challenge it. Now they couldn't deny it because it had been legally documented and proven in court. I never reconciled with my parents or Vanessa. No dramatic confrontation, no final conversation, just permanent separation. They'd shown me exactly who they were over 28 years, then confirmed it by suing me for assets I'd earned through my own work. The relationship had been transactional my entire life. They invested in Vanessa and expected me to fund myself while being grateful for the privilege of existing. When I succeeded despite their neglect, they tried to claim credit and extract payment. The penthouse remains mine, full ownership, no strings attached. I refinanced last month at a better rate, lowering my monthly payment by $400. I've furnished it exactly how I want, with no input from anyone about what would look better or cost less, or be more practical. My home office has 4 monitors now, because I wanted 4 monitors. My kitchen has the overpriced espresso machine I debated buying. My guest room has been converted into a library because I'd rather have books than accommodate visitors I don't want. I saw my mother once more, unexpectedly, in a Bellevue Whole Foods 6 months after the trial. She was comparing prices on generic versus name brand items, something I'd never seen her do before. She looked older, tired, wearing clothes that seemed worn instead of her usual put-together appearance. She saw me, froze, then hurried down another aisle. I continued my shopping and left without engaging. I felt nothing. No satisfaction at her obvious financial struggles, no regret about the estrangement, just neutral observation of a stranger I used to know. My career continued its upward trajectory. I led a major project that earned company-wide recognition. I was invited to speak at a tech conference about software architecture. I started mentoring junior developers, particularly women in tech, because I remembered what it was like to build success without family support. One mentee asked me once how I stayed motivated when I was starting out with no safety net. I told her the truth. Spite is an excellent motivator when you're determined to prove doubters wrong. The lawsuit cost my parents their retirement security, damaged their reputation among family, and created a permanent legal record of their behavior. The $47,000 they paid me in fees funded a complete home theater system and new furniture for my living room. Vanessa lost her fantasy of getting handed a luxury penthouse and had to finally join the workforce like everyone else. I lost nothing because they'd given me nothing to lose. I don't regret refusing their demand. I don't regret fighting the lawsuit instead of settling. I don't regret the estrangement or the public humiliation they faced in court, or the financial consequences they've suffered. They made choices for 28 years about which daughter to invest in. They chose to sue me instead of accepting my refusal. They chose to forge emails and attempt break-ins and lie to their attorney. Every consequence they're experiencing stems directly from their decisions. Sometimes people ask if I miss having parents. I tell them I never really had parents in the meaningful sense. I had 2 people who provided basic legal guardianship, while making it clear I was the less valuable child. What I have now is freedom from their toxicity, from the constant comparisons, from watching Vanessa get handed things I had to earn. I have a life built entirely through my own effort, and no one can claim credit or demand a share. My penthouse sits on the 18th floor with a view of Elliott Bay and the Olympic Mountains. On clear evenings, I watch the sun set over the water from my balcony with a glass of wine, and no relatives expecting me to fund their lifestyle or sacrifice my success for someone else's benefit. This is what I worked for. Not just the property, but the peace that comes with cutting off people who only valued what I could provide them. The judge reading my evidence and watching my parents' faces freeze was satisfying. But the real victory is waking up every morning in a home that's entirely mine, built with money I earned, decorated to my taste, occupied solely by people I choose to allow in. My parents demanded I hand it over. The court said no, and I get to live with that vindication every single day. The week after the trial, I implemented what Lauren called fortress protocols. Every door in my penthouse got upgraded to commercial-grade locks with biometric scanners. I installed additional cameras in the hallway outside my unit, legally positioned to monitor only my doorway. The building management approved after I showed them the court order and security incident reports. They were relieved to have documentation justifying the enhanced measures. My HR department at Technova called me in for a meeting. Apparently, Vanessa had contacted them claiming I'd stolen family property and shouldn't be trusted with company assets. She'd used the main customer service line, leaving a rambling voicemail about her thief sister working there. HR wanted to verify the situation before it became a problem. I brought the court order and judgment. My manager read it, apologized for the intrusion, and assured me they'd flag any further contact from my family as harassment. The financial impact on my parents became more apparent through my aunt's updates. She felt guilty being the information source, but believed I deserved to know if they were planning anything else. Their Bellevue house, purchased in 1998 for $185,000 and worth approximately $450,000 now, had a first mortgage of $89,000 and a new second mortgage of $55,000 taken to pay my legal fees. Their monthly housing costs had jumped from $920 to $2,100. On their combined income of $73, annually, this was unsustainable. My father's Home Depot job paid $16.50 hourly for 25 hours weekly, adding roughly $1,650 monthly before taxes. My mother increased her bookkeeping from part-time to nearly full-time, bringing her income to approximately $3,200 monthly. Together, they were grossing about $6,000 monthly, with the mortgage consuming over a third. They'd had to cancel their annual cruise, downgrade their car insurance, and stop eating at restaurants. My aunt noted they looked 10 years older than they had 6 months ago. Vanessa's situation was equally dire by her standards. The call center paid $18 hourly for 40 hours weekly, grossing about $2,880 monthly. Her rent and studio with 2 roommates cost $100 for her share. She'd never budgeted before, never had to choose between purchases, never experienced actual financial constraint. Her Instagram transformed from aspirational lifestyle content to bitter posts about being broke and abandoned by family. Her follower count dropped from 200 to 140 as people tired of the negativity. I received a LinkedIn message from someone claiming to be Vanessa's therapist, suggesting family therapy to heal our relationship. This seemed wildly inappropriate and possibly unethical. I reported it to LinkedIn for harassment and contacted the Washington State Department of Health to report potential HIPAA violations if this was actually a licensed therapist. The account disappeared within 48 hours. I suspected it had been Vanessa herself trying a new manipulation angle. My parents attempted contact through progressively desperate channels. A letter arrived via certified mail in October, handwritten by my mother, describing their financial hardship and how they'd learned their lesson about legal action. The final paragraph asked if I'd consider gifting them $30 to refinance the second mortgage at a better rate. I scanned it, added it to my harassment documentation file, and sent it to Lauren. She advised keeping everything but not responding. November brought an unexpected development. Hemmings's law firm sent me a formal letter stating that Richard and Patricia Bennett had filed a complaint against them for malpractice, claiming inadequate representation caused them to lose the case. The firm was notifying me as a courtesy since I might be contacted during their investigation. They were vigorously defending against the claim and expected it to be dismissed quickly. They attached their response showing my parents had concealed material facts and rejected settlement advice. The malpractice complaint was public record. I obtained a copy through the court system. My parents claimed Hemmings should have known about the security footage and prepared counter-arguments. They argued he should have advised them not to proceed once he learned they had no financial records. They wanted him to pay the $47 judgment plus additional damages for emotional distress. The complaint was 40 pages of blaming everyone except themselves. Hemmings' response was devastating. He included detailed notes from every client meeting where he'd warned them the case was weak. He had emails where he'd explicitly asked about evidence of their claimed $640 contribution, and they'd responded vaguely about supporting her over the years. He had documented their refusal to accept his settlement recommendations. He included the moment during discovery when he'd learned about the attempted break-ins and had recommended immediate withdrawal, which they'd rejected. His response concluded that no attorney could have won a case based on fabricated evidence and false claims. The state bar assigned an investigator who contacted me in December. She wanted to verify the timeline and confirm my parents' behavior. I provided everything: the full court record, security footage, financial documentation, the works. She reviewed it all during a 2-hour meeting at a coffee shop near my office. At the end, she closed her laptop and said, "I've seen some bold malpractice claims, but this is remarkable. They're essentially admitting they lied to their attorney and now want him punished for not making those lies work in court." She told me the complaint would almost certainly be dismissed with potential sanctions against my parents for filing it frivolously. The Bar Association took false complaints seriously because they wasted resources and damaged attorneys' reputations. She expected a ruling within 60 days. I thanked her and went back to work. Another piece of evidence added to the growing file documenting my family's behavior. Christmas approached, and my aunt invited me to her annual party. She'd specifically disinvited my parents and Vanessa after they'd tried to make attendance conditional on me not being there. She'd told them this was her home and her party, and if they couldn't be civil adults, they could stay away. 8 other relatives attended, who'd previously remained neutral. Most approached me privately to apologize for not recognizing the favoritism sooner or speaking up when they'd witnessed it. My uncle cornered me near the dessert table. "Your father called me last week asking for a $20 loan. Said you'd ruined them financially with the lawsuit, and could I help family in need?" He paused. I told him I'd read the court documents, and he'd ruined himself by suing you for property that wasn't his. He hung up on me. We haven't spoken since. Other relatives shared similar stories. My parents had contacted everyone in the extended family requesting loans or gifts to cover their mortgage. They'd framed it as me being vindictive and refusing to help despite having plenty of money. Most relatives had initially considered helping until they learned the full story. My father's brother had actually pulled the court records online and read the entire case file. He'd called my father afterward and, according to my aunt, told him he was getting exactly what he deserved. I learned that Vanessa had been fired from the call center in early December for excessive absences and arguing with supervisors. She'd apparently believed the rules about showing up on time didn't apply to her. She was now unemployed again, applying for positions but being rejected due to her spotty work history. She'd posted on Facebook asking if anyone knew of jobs that paid well but didn't require much effort or strict schedules. The comments were not supportive. January brought the Bar Association's decision. The malpractice complaint was dismissed with a written opinion stating the claim was wholly without merit and bordered on sanctionable conduct. The opinion noted that Attorney Hemmings had provided competent representation of an unwinnable case and could not be faulted for his client's decision to present fabricated evidence. My parents were ordered to pay $500 toward the Bar Association's investigative costs. Hemmings sent me a copy with a note thanking me for my cooperation and expressing relief that justice had prevailed. My parents' financial situation continued deteriorating. My aunt reported they were now 3 months behind on the second mortgage and receiving default notices. The lender was threatening foreclosure proceedings. My mother had called my aunt sobbing, asking if she thought I'd reconsider helping since they were about to lose their home. My aunt had said no, I wouldn't and shouldn't. My mother had responded that I was a heartless monster who'd destroyed her family. I felt nothing hearing this. No guilt, no satisfaction, just neutral observation. They'd created this situation through decades of favoritism, followed by an outrageous lawsuit. Natural consequences were unfolding. I hadn't caused their mortgage problems. Their decision to sue me had caused them. Their choice to favor Vanessa financially for 25 years had left them without savings. Their refusal to accept my no had led to legal action. Every step was their decision. Valentine's Day brought an unexpected gift. Vanessa posted a long Facebook rant about how I'd stolen her future and ruined her life. She detailed the penthouse she'd been promised, the lawsuit that corrupt judges had dismissed, and her current poverty that was entirely my fault. She tagged me, my workplace, my building's name, and several relatives. It was unhinged, bitter, and most importantly, legally actionable. I screenshot everything before she deleted it. Lauren reviewed it and smiled. "This is defamation. She's made false statements about you that could damage your professional reputation. We can pursue a restraining order now without waiting for another incident." We filed immediately. The hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks out. The restraining order hearing was far simpler than the property lawsuit. Judge Reeves wasn't assigned this case. We got Judge Morrison, a man in his 60s with no patience for drama. Lauren presented Vanessa's social media posts, the previous security footage of attempted break-ins, and the pattern of harassment. Vanessa showed up without an attorney, wearing ripped jeans again, and tried to argue this was free speech about family problems. Judge Morrison read her Facebook post aloud in court. Every accusation about me being a thief, every claim about promised property, every insult. When he finished, he looked at her. "Miss Bennett, you were party to a lawsuit where these exact claims were dismissed. A judge ruled definitively that your sister owns her property free and clear. Now you're publicly calling her a thief and claiming she stole something that was never yours. That's not free speech. That's defamation and harassment," Vanessa tried to argue. Judge Morrison cut her off. "I'm granting a 2-year restraining order. You are prohibited from contacting Claire Bennett directly or indirectly. No phone calls, emails, texts, social media posts about her, showing up at her residence or workplace, or third-party contact. You are to stay 500 feet away from her at all times. Violation will result in criminal charges. Do you understand?" Vanessa started crying. "This is so unfair. She has everything and I have nothing. Miss Bennett, your financial situation is not this court's concern and doesn't give you the right to harass your sister. This order is effective immediately." He signed it and handed copies to the bailiff. I left with another legal victory and another piece of documentation. Vanessa's Facebook rant had been screenshotted by multiple people and spread through family networks. Relatives who'd remained neutral or sympathetic to my parents now saw clear evidence of Vanessa's entitlement and instability. The narrative shifted completely. I was no longer the ungrateful daughter. I was the successful woman being harassed by jealous family members. My parents made one final attempt in March. They sent a notarized letter through their attorney, not Hemmings, who'd apparently refused further representation, offering to settle all family disputes if I'd agree to pay off their second mortgage. The letter claimed this would allow everyone to move forward and heal relationships. It was signed by both parents and included language about how families should support each other in times of need. Lauren read it and started laughing. They're trying to reframe their mortgage problem as a family dispute that you're obligated to resolve. This is honestly impressive in its audacity. I didn't respond to the letter. Lauren sent a formal reply stating I had no legal or moral obligation to pay debts my parents had incurred through their own choices, and any further contact would be considered harassment under the existing restraining order against Vanessa and potential grounds for additional legal action. The foreclosure proceedings on my parents' house began in April. Public records showed the second mortgage lender had filed default notices after 6 missed payments. My parents owed approximately $800–900 in late payments plus fees. They'd have 90 days to cure the default or face sale. My aunt called to tell me this, her voice sad. I know they brought this on themselves, but it's hard watching them lose their home. I understood her sympathy but didn't share it. They didn't have to take that second mortgage. They chose to sue me. They chose to hire an expensive attorney. They chose to proceed even when advised to settle. They chose to lie about evidence. Every consequence stems from their decisions. She sighed. You're right. I just remember when they were different people, before all this favoritism with Vanessa destroyed them. They were always these people, I corrected. The lawsuit just made it public. By May, 1 year after receiving the initial lawsuit papers, my life had stabilized completely while my parents continued unraveling. I'd received another promotion, this time to senior principal architect with a compensation package totaling $440 annually. I'd paid off my penthouse mortgage early using accumulated stock options, making me outright owner of a property now valued at $2 million. I'd started a relationship with someone who treated me as an equal partner, not an ATM or lesser sibling. My parents sold their house in June to avoid foreclosure. They netted approximately $290,000 after paying off both mortgages, closing costs, and fees. They used part of that to buy a small 2-bedroom condo in a less desirable area for $195,000 cash, leaving them with about $95,000 in savings. They'd lost their retirement security, their social standing, and their larger home. My aunt reported they looked defeated, aged, and bitter. Vanessa moved in with them, the 3 of them in a 2-bedroom condo, 2 people who'd enabled her dysfunction, and the dysfunctional adult child they'd created. My aunt said the living situation was tense, with constant arguments about money and responsibilities. Vanessa still couldn't keep a job. My parents couldn't afford to support her anymore. The dynamic they'd maintained for 25 years had collapsed under financial reality. The restraining order against Vanessa didn't stop her from creating new social media accounts to monitor me. I discovered this in July when a colleague mentioned seeing someone with Vanessa's photos commenting on my company's LinkedIn posts about my promotion. The account was under a different name, Nessa Bennington, but the profile picture was definitely her. She'd commented, "Nepotism and family theft built this career on the announcement." I documented it and reported it to LinkedIn for harassment via fake account. The profile was removed within a day, but she created another one within a week. This time, V. Benjamin posting on articles about tech industry salaries with comments about how some people get ahead by stealing from family. I reported that one too. It became a pattern. She'd create an account, I'd report it, it would be deleted, she'd create another. Lauren advised documenting every instance, but not engaging. She's violating the restraining order with this indirect contact, she explained. Keep records. If it escalates or if she makes threats, we can pursue criminal charges. I created a dedicated folder with screenshots of every fake account, every comment, every violation. The folder grew to 37 separate incidents by September. My professional life continued its upward trajectory. I was invited to keynote a Women in Tech conference in October, speaking about building success without family support. The event organizers wanted my story specifically because it highlighted resilience and self-determination. I accepted, seeing it as an opportunity to help other women who'd faced similar family dynamics. Preparing the keynote required confronting my past more directly than I'd done before. I outlined my childhood, the favoritism, the lawsuit, the eventual estrangement. Writing it as a coherent narrative rather than fragmented memories was therapeutic. I realized how much I'd normalized the dysfunction until it became impossible to ignore. The little girl who'd slept in the converted storage room had believed that was normal. The teenager who'd worked 20 hours weekly while her sister got an allowance had thought that was fair. The college student who'd paid her own way while her sister's failed education was funded had accepted that as family dynamics. The lawsuit had been the breaking point, but the foundation had been cracking for years. My parents hadn't suddenly become terrible when they sued me. They'd always prioritized Vanessa. The legal action was just the natural escalation of a lifelong pattern. The keynote went exceptionally well. The audience of about 400 women responded with a standing ovation. Afterward, dozens approached me sharing their own stories of family favoritism, financial manipulation, and eventual estrangement. One woman told me she'd been supporting her parents and 3 siblings financially for a decade, while they treated her as an obligation. My story had given her permission to stop. Another said she'd been considering giving her inheritance to her brother because her parents pressured her to share with family. She'd decided to keep it. A journalist from a tech industry publication asked to interview me about the keynote. The resulting article, titled "Breaking Free: How One Engineer Built Success Despite Family Sabotage," went viral in tech circles. It included my full story: the favoritism, the lawsuit, the attempted break-ins, the restraining order, everything. My company's PR team contacted me worried about negative attention. I showed them the overwhelmingly positive response on social media. People weren't criticizing me. They were praising my strength and condemning my family's behavior. The article reached my parents somehow. My aunt called to warn me they were furious about being publicly portrayed as bad parents. They were considering suing me for defamation. I reminded her that truth is an absolute defense against defamation, and everything in the article was documented in court records. She agreed but said they were desperate and irrational. I told Lauren about the defamation threat. She sent a preemptive letter to my parents reminding them that all statements in the article were factually accurate and provable, and any defamation lawsuit would be immediately dismissed, while potentially subjecting them to further sanctions. November marked 18 months since the original lawsuit. I'd had zero direct contact with my parents or Vanessa in that time. The restraining order had been violated 37 times via fake social media accounts, but never in person. My parents had lost approximately $360 in home equity, retirement savings, and legal costs. Vanessa had cycled through 5 jobs in 18 months, currently unemployed again. I'd increased my net worth by approximately $1. $4 million through salary, stock options, and property appreciation. My aunt hosted Thanksgiving and invited me, but not my parents or Vanessa. She'd made the decision final after my mother called her crying about the article and asking her to convince me to retract it. My aunt had read the article, confirmed everything in it was accurate, and told my mother she was done enabling their victimhood narrative. 15 relatives attended her Thanksgiving. 8 specifically mentioned supporting my decision to cut off my parents. 4 shared their own stories of family favoritism they'd witnessed growing up. My uncle pulled me aside after dinner. "Your dad called me last week. Wanted to know if I'd read that article and if I believed Claire's lies. I told him I'd read the court documents years ago and knew everything in that article was true. He called me a traitor to family. I told him he'd betrayed his own daughter for 28 years and had no moral authority to lecture anyone about family loyalty." He paused. "We're not speaking anymore. I'm okay with that." Christmas brought another round of my parents attempting contact through relatives. This time, they tried my aunt's husband, who'd remained somewhat neutral. They asked him to host a reconciliation dinner, where we could all talk without attorneys present. He discussed it with my aunt, who asked me if I had any interest. I said absolutely not. He called my parents back and declined. They accused him of being controlled by his wife and enabling my cruelty. He told them not to contact him again. Vanessa's Instagram, which I monitored through a friend's account since I'd blocked her, showed increasing desperation. She posted about being evicted from the condo, though I learned through my aunt this was actually my parents asking her to leave because they couldn't afford to support her anymore. She moved into a house with 4 other roommates in Auburn, a 40-minute commute from Seattle, paying $650 monthly for a bedroom. Her posts oscillated between blaming me for her situation and posting inspirational quotes about overcoming adversity. In January, 2 years after purchasing my penthouse, I decided to stop monitoring Vanessa's social media even indirectly. She wasn't a threat. Just a bitter person cycling through jobs and housing while blaming others for consequences of her own choices. I told my friend she didn't need to update me anymore. Whatever Vanessa was doing or saying no longer mattered to my life. My professional reputation had grown significantly. The viral article led to speaking invitations at 3 more conferences. A literary agent contacted me about writing a book about family estrangement and financial independence. I was considering it, but wanted to ensure my parents couldn't sue claiming I was profiting from their story. Lauren researched and confirmed that as long as everything was truthful and already public record, I was protected. February brought unexpected news from my aunt. My father had suffered a minor heart attack. He'd recovered and was home from the hospital, but it had scared both parents. My mother had called my aunt asking if this might be the crisis that brought the family back together. My aunt had gently told her that medical emergencies don't erase years of mistreatment and legal battles. My mother had hung up crying. I felt a brief flicker of something hearing about my father's heart attack. Not quite concern, not quite satisfaction, more like distant acknowledgement that he was mortal and aging and facing consequences of stress he'd created. I didn't reach out. I didn't send flowers or a card. I maintained the boundary I'd established. Lauren agreed this was appropriate. You're not obligated to provide comfort to people who spent decades showing you none. My relationship with my partner had progressed to the point where we were discussing moving in together. He suggested selling his condo and moving into my penthouse. I hesitated not because I didn't want him there, but because the penthouse represented something specific. My achievement, my escape, my proof that I could build success without my family. Having someone else there, even someone I loved, changed that symbolism. We talked through it over several weeks. He understood the penthouse was more than just a home to me. It was evidence of my independence, protection against my family, a fortress I'd built. He suggested we keep both properties initially, with him spending time at mine without officially moving in, letting me maintain full ownership and control. I appreciated his understanding. We decided to continue as we were, preserving my space while building our relationship. March marked the 2-year anniversary of my parents' lawsuit being filed. I'd kept every document from the case in a dedicated filing cabinet. Court records, legal briefs, security footage, financial documentation, the judgment, the fee payment, the restraining order, the bar complaint dismissal. It was a complete archive of their attempt to steal my property and the legal consequences. I wasn't sure why I kept it all. I'd scanned everything digitally, but the physical papers felt important somehow. My aunt called in April with news that my parents were considering selling their condo and moving to a cheaper state. Washington's cost of living was becoming unmanageable on their limited income. They were looking at Arizona or New Mexico, places with lower taxes and housing costs. She asked if I wanted to know before they moved. I said no. Where they lived didn't matter to me as long as they weren't near me. I learned through a former colleague who'd stayed connected on social media that Vanessa had posted a long Facebook note about forgiving family who've wronged you and choosing peace over grudges. The post included vague references to being the bigger person and moving forward despite others' bitterness. Several people commented supportively, not knowing the full story. A few who did know commented with eye-roll emojis. I didn't engage or even look at it directly. Her narrative about being the victim was something she'd clearly decided to maintain. My career hit another milestone in May, when I was offered a position as vice president of engineering at a different tech company. The salary was $520. $500 base plus equity, potentially worth millions if the company went public as planned. It was a massive opportunity, but would require leaving Technova where I'd built my reputation. I spent 2 weeks considering, discussing with my partner and trusted colleagues, weighing the risks. I accepted the position. The announcement went out in June. My LinkedIn post about the new role received over 800 likes and 150 congratulatory comments. Buried among them was a comment from an account I didn't recognize. Some people climb over their own family to get ahead. Congratulations on your blood money success. I checked the profile. Another Vanessa fake account. I reported it, screenshotted it for my records, and moved on. It was incident number 43 in the documentation file. The new VP role started in July with an intensity that consumed my attention completely. Leading a 75-person engineering team across 4 product lines required every skill I'd developed, plus several I needed to learn quickly. The imposter syndrome hit hard initially. Was I actually qualified for this level of responsibility? Or had I gotten lucky? My therapist, who I'd started seeing after the lawsuit to process family trauma, helped me recognize this doubt as a lingering effect of growing up told I was less valuable than my sister. August brought my 29th birthday. My partner organized a small celebration with close friends, none of whom were family. During the toast, he mentioned how far I'd come in the year he'd known me, The promotion, the speaking engagements, the growing reputation in the industry. Someone asked if my parents were proud. The table went quiet. My partner smoothly changed the subject, but the moment reminded me that people still expected family pride and support as default. They struggled to comprehend complete estrangement. Later that night, alone on my balcony, I thought about what my birthday had been like growing up. My parents had acknowledged it with dinner at a mid-range restaurant, usually combined with some other family obligation to minimize the specialness. Vanessa's birthdays had been events, themed parties, expensive gifts, celebrations that lasted entire weekends. When I'd turned 16, the age most people consider milestone-worthy, I'd gotten a card and $50. Vanessa's 16th had included a catered party for 30 people and a $1,000 shopping spree. I'd stopped expecting equality around age 12. The disappointment of hoping they'd care had been worse than accepting they wouldn't. Now at 29, I had no family calling to wish me happy birthday, no cards from parents, no sister's text. But I also had genuine friends, a partner who valued me, colleagues who respected me, and a career I'd built through my own merit. The absence of family felt like freedom rather than loss. September brought an unexpected complication. My company's general counsel called me into a meeting. Someone had sent an anonymous package to our headquarters containing printed copies of my family's court documents, with a note claiming I was unstable due to family conflicts and suggesting I wasn't fit for leadership. The GC had reviewed everything and determined it was clearly a harassment attempt, but they needed to address it officially. I sat in the conference room with the GC and VP of HR explaining my family history for the second time in 2 years. I provided context about the lawsuit, the restraining order, the pattern of harassment via fake social media accounts. I showed them the documentation file I'd maintained. They were sympathetic and concerned, particularly about whether this would escalate. I honestly didn't know. My family had been quiet for months, but this suggested they were monitoring my career moves and attempting sabotage. The company assigned a security consultant to assess threat level. He reviewed everything and concluded this was harassment and reputation damage attempt without apparent risk of physical danger. He recommended documenting any future incidents and maintaining current security measures. The company offered to involve law enforcement if I wanted. I said I'd discuss with my attorney first. Lauren's reaction was immediate. This is criminal harassment and potentially stalking. They're contacting your employer with false information intended to damage your career. We need to file a police report and potentially pursue charges. We filed reports with Seattle PD that afternoon. The detective assigned was a woman in her 40s who'd seen plenty of family conflict-turned-harassment cases. She requested all my documentation. The investigation moved slowly. Police resources for harassment cases were limited unless there was imminent physical danger. The detective did contact my parents' local police department in Arizona. They'd moved there in June, for a welfare check and warning. My father answered the door and denied sending anything to my employer. The Arizona officer noted he became agitated and defensive when questioned, stating his daughter had ruined his life with false accusations. No arrest was made, but the incident was documented. 2 weeks later, another package arrived at my company. This one contained printed screenshots of Vanessa's Facebook posts mixed with pages from my social media, edited to make it appear I'd posted cruel things about family. The forgeries were obvious to anyone paying attention. Wrong fonts, inconsistent timestamps, clear signs of image manipulation. But someone was investing time and effort into this campaign. The return address on both packages was fake. The postmarks showed they'd been mailed from different locations in Arizona. Handwriting analysis on the addressed labels showed 2 different writers. The detective's assessment, my parents working together or with Vanessa's involvement. Proving which specific person had mailed them would be nearly impossible without confession or surveillance footage from post offices. My company remained supportive, but I could sense their discomfort. They'd hired me for leadership and technical expertise, not drama involving male harassment and family court records. I volunteered to resign if this became a liability. The CEO refused. We hired you based on your skills and track record. Your family's harassment is not your fault and won't affect your position here. But we do need to ensure this doesn't disrupt operations. October brought a shift in tactics. Someone created a website called The Truth About Claire Bennett.com, filled with distorted information about the lawsuit. The site claimed I'd manipulated court proceedings, that my parents had given me everything and I'd repaid them with cruelty, that I'd forged evidence and bribed officials. It included our family photos from years ago, my professional headshot from LinkedIn, and my company's name. The About page claimed to be run by concerned citizens who know Claire personally, but was obviously my family. The website violated multiple laws: defamation, false light invasion of privacy, potentially cyberstalking. Lauren immediately filed a lawsuit against the anonymous site operators while simultaneously requesting emergency takedown from the hosting company. The host required a court order. We got one within 48 hours. Judge Morrison, who'd handled the restraining order, reviewed the site's content and my documentation of ongoing harassment. His order to the hosting company was scathing about baseless defamatory content clearly intended to harm the plaintiff's professional reputation. The site went down 3 days after launch, but screenshots had circulated. Several people sent me links asking if I'd seen it. I had to explain repeatedly that it was harassment from estranged family. Everything on it was false, and we'd gotten it legally removed. Each explanation felt like reopening the wound my family kept trying to inflict. The forensic investigation into the website's creation revealed it had been registered using a free proxy service that hid the owner's identity. The payment had been made with a Visa gift card purchased with cash. The initial setup had been done from a library computer in Phoenix. Someone had thought through how to avoid identification. This wasn't impulsive harassment. This was planned, methodical sabotage. November brought a break. Vanessa posted on her Instagram about finally taking action to get justice after 2 years of being silenced. She included a screenshot of the now-defunct website's homepage with a caption about how truth always comes out. This was direct evidence linking her to the website. She'd essentially admitted involvement publicly, while apparently believing the proxy service made her untraceable. I screenshot everything before she could delete it. Lauren filed it immediately with Seattle PD and with the court handling our harassment case. The detective contacted Vanessa directly. According to the police report, Vanessa initially denied involvement, then claimed she'd only shared a link someone else sent her, then finally admitted she'd helped with content because someone needed to tell the truth about me. The admission of helping with content was enough. Combined with the pattern of harassment documented over 2 years, the prosecutor's office agreed to file charges. Vanessa was charged with cyberstalking and criminal harassment. A warrant was issued for her arrest. She was picked up at her Auburn residence 2 days before Thanksgiving. My aunt called crying after seeing the news. "This has gone too far. Vanessa's been arrested. Your parents are beside themselves. Can't you please just talk to them and work this out as a family?" I felt a surge of anger I'd been suppressing for months. "Aunt Linda, they sued me for property I bought myself. They tried to break into my home. They've harassed me for 2 years. They sent packages to my employer trying to get me fired. They created a defamatory website. At what point does working it out as family stop being my responsibility?" She was quiet for a moment. "You're right, I'm sorry. I just hate seeing everyone suffer." "I'm not suffering," I said firmly. "I'm thriving despite their attempts to destroy me. They're suffering because consequences finally caught up with their behavior." We ended the call on awkward terms. Vanessa's arraignment was scheduled for early December. She appeared before a judge via video from jail, looking haggard and crying. She pleaded not guilty. Bail was set at $5,000. My parents posted it immediately, draining more of their limited savings. The prosecutor requested conditions including no contact with me directly or indirectly, no social media posts about me, and surrender of all electronic devices for forensic examination. The judge granted all conditions. The preliminary hearing revealed more than I'd expected. Forensic examination of Vanessa's phone and laptop showed she'd been obsessively monitoring me for 2 years. Hundreds of screenshots of my social media, LinkedIn, company announcements, Google searches for my address, salary information, relationship status, drafted emails to my employers that she'd never sent. The detective testified this showed clear pattern of obsessive focus meeting the definition of stalking. Most damning was a text thread between Vanessa and my mother. In it, my mother encouraged Vanessa to make Claire understand what she's done to this family, and suggested if her company knew the truth about her, they'd fire her. My mother had sent Vanessa my work address. She'd discussed strategies for exposing Claire's lies. The thread showed at minimum my mother's knowledge of the harassment, at maximum her active participation. The prosecutor filed additional charges against my mother as an accomplice to harassment, another arrest warrant, another court appearance. My father claimed ignorance of all of it, saying his wife and daughter had kept him in the dark. Phone records showed he'd been on calls with both of them during periods when harassment was being planned. The prosecutor didn't charge him but listed him as an unindicted co-conspirator. I sat in the courtroom for my mother's arraignment. She looked 20 years older than she had at the property lawsuit hearing 18 months ago. Her attorney argued she was a confused elderly woman who'd been manipulated by her troubled daughter. The prosecutor presented the text messages showing clear intent and planning. Bail was set at $7,500. My father posted it. probably depleting their remaining savings entirely. Christmas came without any contact from family, which was expected given the restraining orders and criminal charges. I spent it with my partner's family, who welcomed me warmly and asked no uncomfortable questions. His mother pulled me aside at one point and said, "I don't know your full story, but I can see you've been through something difficult. You're safe here." I almost cried at the simple kindness. New Year's Eve 2025, I stood on my balcony watching fireworks over Elliott Bay. 3 years since buying this penthouse. 2.5 years since the property lawsuit. 2 years since the restraining order. 6 months since the criminal charges. I thought about who I'd been at 26, still hoping my parents might change, still trying to earn their approval, still believing family meant obligation. Now at 29, I understood family was supposed to be people who supported you, who celebrated your success instead of trying to steal it, who protected rather than attacked. My biological family didn't fit that definition. The people in my life who did, my partner, close friends, supportive colleagues, even my aunt who'd eventually chosen truth over neutrality, those were my real family. The trial for Vanessa's cyberstalking and harassment charges began in February 2025. The prosecutor had offered a plea deal, guilty plea with recommendation for probation and mandatory counseling in exchange for full cooperation and a formal apology. Vanessa refused. She insisted on going to trial, apparently believing she could convince a jury she'd been justified in her actions. The prosecution's case was methodical and devastating. They presented the 2-year timeline of harassment starting with attempted break-ins at my penthouse, progressing through 43 fake social media accounts, the packages sent to my employer, and culminating in the defamatory website. Each incident was documented with screenshots, security footage, police reports, and my detailed record-keeping. The forensic evidence from Vanessa's devices was damning. The jury saw hundreds of screenshots she'd taken of my social media posts. They saw her obsessive Google searches, my name combined with terms like salary, net worth, boyfriend, apartment value. They saw draft emails she'd written to my company making false allegations about my character and competence. The detective testified this demonstrated systematic stalking behavior escalating over time. Vanessa took the stand against her attorney's advice. She immediately began crying, telling the jury about growing up in her successful sister's shadow, watching me get everything while she struggled. The prosecutor let her talk, knowing she was helping the case. She admitted creating the fake accounts just to see what Claire was doing, because I'd blocked her. She admitted sending the packages because someone needed to tell Claire's employer the truth about her character. On cross-examination, the prosecutor systematically destroyed her narrative. "Miss Bennett, you testified you grew up in your sister's shadow, but didn't you have the larger bedroom in your family home?" Vanessa admitted she had. "Didn't your parents pay for your college education while Claire paid for her own?" "Yes." "Didn't you receive a monthly allowance while Claire worked part-time?" "Yes." "So when you say Claire got everything, what exactly did she get that you didn't?" Vanessa's answer was telling. She got to be the smart one, the successful one. Everyone praised her for her career while I was just the struggling daughter. She made me look bad just by existing. The prosecutor let that statement hang in the air. Several jurors exchanged glances. Making someone look bad by existing wasn't grounds for 2 years of harassment. The prosecutor continued. "You created 43 fake social media accounts to monitor and harass your sister. That's not casual curiosity. That's obsession. You sent packages to her employer trying to get her fired. That's not seeking fairness. That's attempted sabotage. You created a website making false claims about her. That's not expressing frustration. That's defamation. At what point did you believe these actions were appropriate?" Vanessa had no good answer. She cycled through justifications. She was hurt, she was angry, she felt abandoned. She deserved better treatment. None of it justified the behavior. The prosecutor ended by asking, "Did your sister ever contact you during these 2 years?" "No." "Did she respond to your harassment?" "No." "Did she do anything to provoke this campaign except succeed in her career while you struggled?" Vanessa couldn't answer. The jury deliberated for 90 minutes. Guilty on all counts: cyberstalking, criminal harassment, violation of restraining order. Sentencing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. Vanessa's attorney requested probation, citing her lack of prior criminal record. The prosecutor requested jail time, citing the sustained nature of the harassment and Vanessa's clear lack of remorse. My mother's trial was scheduled separately, but she changed her plea to guilty after seeing Vanessa's conviction. Her attorney negotiated a deal: guilty plea to accomplice to harassment, sentence recommendation of probation, with strict conditions including no contact with me and mandatory counseling. The judge accepted it. My mother stood before the court crying as the judge told her, "Enabling your daughter's harassment while participating yourself shows a profound failure of parental judgment." At Vanessa's sentencing hearing, I exercised my right as a victim to give an impact statement. I stood at the podium with 3 years of documented harassment in front of me and spoke directly to the judge. "Your Honor, Vanessa Bennett has spent 2 years attempting to destroy my professional reputation, my sense of security, and my peace of mind. She did this not because I harmed her, but because I succeeded where she failed. She grew up receiving every advantage: financial support, parental favoritism, a family that excused her failures and celebrated her mediocrity. I grew up with none of those advantages, but built a successful career through my own effort. The harassment began when I refused to hand over property I'd purchased with my own money. It escalated when I successfully defended myself in court against my parents' baseless lawsuit. It intensified when my career continued to advance despite their attempts at sabotage. Vanessa didn't want justice or fairness. She wanted me to fail so she could feel better about her own failures. I'm asking this court to impose a sentence that reflects the severity and sustained nature of her actions. This wasn't a single mistake. It was a 2-year campaign of stalking and harassment. She showed no remorse during trial, only self-pity and entitlement. Without meaningful consequences, she will continue this behavior because she fundamentally believes she's entitled to what I've earned. Judge Morrison listened carefully, reviewed the evidence file, and delivered his sentence. "Miss Bennett, you have demonstrated over 2 years an obsessive fixation on your sister, motivated by jealousy and entitlement. You violated a restraining order, engaged in cyberstalking, committed criminal harassment, and showed absolutely no recognition of wrongdoing. The court sentences you to 18 months in county jail, followed by 3 years probation with strict conditions including mental health treatment, no contact with the victim, and no social media use without probation approval." Vanessa was taken into custody immediately. She screamed as the bailiffs approached her. "This is so unfair. Claire gets everything and I go to jail. She's the one who destroyed our family." Judge Morrison's expression didn't change as she was led away, still yelling. My mother attended the sentencing and left the courtroom sobbing. I watched her go without feeling. She'd spent 28 years enabling Vanessa's entitlement and participating in my mistreatment. Now she was facing consequences for continuing that pattern into criminal behavior. I felt no satisfaction in her tears, just cold acknowledgement that justice had been served. The aftermath rippled through what remained of my extended family. My aunt called to say she was relieved it was finally over, but worried about my parents' ability to cope. My uncle said he felt vindicated in cutting them off after reading the trial transcripts. Several cousins reached out apologizing for not believing the situation was as bad as I'd described. I accepted their apologies but maintained distance. They'd had plenty of evidence over the years and had chosen neutrality. My company's HR department received formal notification of the criminal convictions. The GC sent me a note thanking me for my patience during the investigation and confirming the case was now closed from their perspective. My team had remained supportive throughout, with several colleagues telling me they admired how I'd handled the situation professionally, despite the personal stress. March brought my 30th birthday, a milestone I'd once imagined celebrating with family now passed with chosen family instead. My partner organized a surprise party with 30 friends and colleagues. No biological family attended or sent wishes. No one at the party expected them to. I blew out candles on a cake that said 30 and thriving, and felt genuinely content. April brought news from my aunt that my parents were declaring bankruptcy. The combination of legal fees, court costs, depleted retirement savings, and my mother's criminal defense had destroyed them financially. Their Arizona condo was underwater on its mortgage. They were living on Social Security and my father's part-time income. My aunt asked if I felt any sympathy. I said no. They'd chosen every step that led them there. I learned through court records that my parents had filed a civil suit against the website hosting company for facilitating harassment by not removing the defamatory site quickly enough. The suit was frivolous and dismissed immediately, costing them another $3 in filing fees they couldn't afford. Their attorney filed a motion to withdraw, citing their inability to pay and their insistence on pursuing unwinnable claims. The judge granted it. May marked 3 years since the property lawsuit had been filed. I pulled out my filing cabinet full of documents and reviewed everything chronologically. The lawsuit complaint with its ridiculous claims, the discovery documents showing their lies, the trial transcript, the judgment, the restraining order, the harassment documentation, the criminal charges, The convictions, it read like a cautionary tale about family entitlement taken to criminal extremes. I'd spent $73,000 total on legal fees over 3 years across all proceedings. I'd recovered $47,000 through the original judgment. The net cost of defending myself against my family was $26,000. Expensive but worthwhile to establish permanent legal boundaries and see justice served. My family had spent over $150,000 they couldn't afford on lawyers, court costs, and bail. They'd lost their home equity, retirement savings, and their freedom in my mother and Vanessa's cases. The scoreboard was clear. I'd fought back against their attempt to steal my property and their subsequent harassment campaign. I'd won every legal battle. I'd maintained my career trajectory despite their sabotage attempts. I'd protected my peace and established boundaries they could no longer cross. They'd lost everything they'd tried to gain, plus much more they'd started with. Vanessa's 18-month jail sentence meant she wouldn't be released until late 2026. My mother's probation conditions included monthly check-ins with a probation officer, continued mental health counseling, and absolute prohibition on contacting me. My father, though never charged, had become a pariah in what remained of our extended family. People who'd known him for decades no longer spoke to him after learning his full role in the property lawsuit and subsequent harassment. I received a letter from Vanessa 6 months into her sentence. It had been screened by jail authorities and my attorney before reaching me. The handwriting was shaky, the tone alternating between self-pity and bitter accusation. She wrote about the injustice of her imprisonment, claimed she'd only wanted what should have been shared fairly, and ended by saying I'd destroyed our family with my selfishness and greed. There was no apology, no recognition of wrongdoing, no acceptance of responsibility. I filed the letter with my other documentation and didn't respond. Lauren had advised me that any contact would only feed Vanessa's obsession. The silence was more powerful than any reply I could give. Vanessa was in jail because of her own choices, facing consequences of her own actions, and still refusing to acknowledge reality. My career continued its trajectory. The VP role I'd worried might be affected by family drama had instead strengthened my reputation as someone who handled adversity with professionalism. I was promoted again in late 2025 to SVP of Engineering, with a compensation package exceeding $600,000 annually. My stock options from the company's planned IPO were projected to be worth $3 million at current valuations. My penthouse, now fully paid off, had appreciated to $4 million. I'd invested systematically in index funds and retirement accounts. My net worth at 30 exceeded $8 million. I'd built this entirely through my own work while my family tried repeatedly to tear me down. Their failure to destroy me had been complete. My aunt remained my only connection to family updates. She told me my parents had moved from their condo to a mobile home park to reduce expenses. They'd sold their car and relied on public transportation. My father's part-time work at 72 years old was necessary to afford basic expenses. My mother's legal and counseling costs continued draining their limited resources. They looked defeated, aged, and bitter every time my aunt saw them. I felt nothing hearing this. No satisfaction, no guilt, no residual affection, just neutral acknowledgement that natural consequences had played out. They'd spent 28 years treating me as lesser than Vanessa, then sued me for property I'd earned, then harassed me for years when that failed. Every hardship they faced stemmed directly from their choices. My relationship with my partner reached the point where we decided to get engaged. He proposed on my penthouse balcony during sunset over Elliott Bay. I said yes without hesitation, knowing I'd found someone who valued me for myself, not for what I could provide. We planned a small wedding with close friends, no family from my side. Several colleagues asked if I'd invite my parents. I said no, without explaining further. The wedding in spring 2026 was exactly what I wanted. 30 people who genuinely cared about me. No obligation invitations, no family drama. My aunt attended as the sole representative of my biological family, having finally chosen a clear side after witnessing years of their behavior. During the reception, she pulled me aside and said, "Your parents made their choices. You made yours. You chose self-respect and they chose entitlement. Look at where those choices led everyone." I thought about that observation during our honeymoon in New Zealand. My parents were in a mobile home park struggling to afford basic expenses. Vanessa was in jail serving time for crimes born of jealousy. My mother was on criminal probation for participating in harassment. My father had alienated most of his family and friends through his behavior. They'd lost their home equity, their savings, their reputation, and their daughters, one to imprisonment and one to permanent estrangement. Meanwhile, I was on my honeymoon with my husband, having just gotten married in my paid-off penthouse, earning over $500,000 annually, with a net worth approaching $5 million. I had genuine friendships, professional respect, and a life built on my own merit. The contrast was stark and entirely of their own making. Vanessa's release date in late 2026 came and went without incident. I received notification from the prosecutor's office that she'd been released on probation with continued strict conditions, including no contact with me, mandatory counseling, and restricted social media use. I updated my security protocols and moved on. She was no longer my problem unless she chose to make herself one, which would only result in more criminal charges. I occasionally searched for my parents online out of morbid curiosity. I found my father's LinkedIn still listed his retail job, updated with seeking part-time opportunities, added to his headline. My mother had no online presence after being banned from most social media platforms for violating their harassment policies during her criminal case. Neither of them had any recent photos or updates visible publicly. Vanessa's social media presence was limited to a monitored Instagram account where she posted occasional generic quotes about overcoming adversity and starting fresh. Nothing about me, nothing about the court cases, nothing about jail, just vague inspirational content that suggested she still saw herself as a victim of circumstances, rather than an offender who'd faced consequences. My aunt told me in late 2027 that my parents had discussed moving out of state again to somewhere even cheaper, possibly Nevada or Oklahoma. They were looking at places where their Social Security and my father's minimal pension would stretch further. Neither had contacted me or attempted to in 3 years. The restraining orders and criminal convictions had finally convinced them I was permanently beyond their reach. I bought a second property in 2027, a mountain cabin near Stevens Pass for weekend getaways. My husband and I spent weekends there hiking, skiing, and enjoying silence far from the city. The cabin cost $780, $0, which I paid in cash from my accumulated stock option sales. It was another piece of property I owned outright, another asset my family couldn't touch, another symbol of success I'd built without them. My company went public in early 2028. My stock options vested at a valuation that netted me $3, $1 million after taxes. My net worth exceeded $8 million. At 32 years old, I'd built wealth that would sustain me for life through my own intelligence and work ethic. The girl who'd slept in a storage room and worked her way through college had become a multi-millionaire tech executive. I thought occasionally about what my parents had lost by treating me as they did. If they'd supported me instead of favoring Vanessa, if they'd celebrated my achievements instead of dismissing them, if they'd respected my boundaries instead of suing me, we might have had a relationship. I might have voluntarily helped them financially in their retirement. They might have been proud grandparents to any future children my husband and I decided to have. Instead, they'd chosen favoritism, entitlement, legal action, and harassment. They'd chosen Vanessa over me at every turn until the courts forced consequences. They'd chosen to keep trying to hurt me even after losing the lawsuit. And now they were living in a mobile home park working into their 70s, while I thrived in every measure of success. The irony wasn't lost on me. The daughter they'd dismissed as less important had become the successful one. The daughter they'd invested everything in was a convicted criminal with a permanent record. Their golden child had tarnished while the scapegoat had flourished. Natural consequences had an elegant symmetry. I stopped checking on them eventually, stopped asking my aunt for updates, stopped caring where they lived or what they were doing. They'd become strangers whose harassment had been legally ended and whose presence in my life existed only in archived documentation. I kept the files, court records, security footage, evidence of their attempts to destroy me, not because I dwelled on it, but because I'd learned that documenting everything protected you when people tried to rewrite history. My life at 33 was everything I'd built it to be. A thriving career I was proud of. A marriage based on mutual respect and genuine partnership. Property I owned outright in my name alone. Financial security that meant I never had to depend on anyone. Friends who'd chosen to be in my life rather than being there by biological obligation. Peace that came from cutting off people who brought only chaos. Sometimes people asked if I ever regretted cutting off my family so completely. I told them the truth. I regretted the family I deserved to have but didn't. I regretted the childhood of favoritism and the adult betrayal. But I didn't regret protecting myself from people who'd proven repeatedly they saw me as a resource to exploit, rather than a person to love. The judge had read my evidence and they'd frozen, first in the property lawsuit, then in the criminal trials. Each time the truth of their behavior had been exposed in court, each time they'd been held accountable, They'd frozen in disbelief that consequences had finally caught up with them. They'd expected to win through family obligation, through manipulation, through persistence. They'd never expected me to fight back with documentation, attorneys, and the legal system that didn't care about their narrative of family loyalty. I'd demanded my $3 million penthouse for myself, earned through my own work. They'd demanded it for Vanessa, claiming entitlement. The judge read the evidence and ruled in my favor. That pattern repeated through every legal battle. They claimed rights they didn't have. I provided evidence they were wrong. Courts ruled accordingly. 3 years of legal battles had established permanent boundaries that protected me from their dysfunction. Vanessa was a convicted criminal, prohibited from contacting me. My mother was on probation with the same restrictions. My father was an unindicted co-conspirator whose involvement was documented. All of them had learned through harsh consequences that attempting to hurt me would only hurt themselves worse. I stood on my penthouse balcony, 33 years old, financially independent, professionally respected, married to someone who valued me, surrounded by chosen family who supported me, and permanently free from biological family who'd only ever brought pain. The city lights sparkled below, the water reflected moonlight, and my home, earned, paid for, and protected through years of work and legal battles, remained mine. They'd frozen when the judge read my evidence. They'd lost everything when the courts ruled against them. And I'd built a life they could never touch again. That was the victory that mattered, not their suffering, but my complete freedom from them.